Hey everyone. First of all, thanks for your kind words on my first tutorial. I'm really happy about your feedback and it made me do this second one. So what do we have here and what are we going to do? Someone on Discord posted an ad by Lancôme, which was kind of a classical skin care vellum Houdini setup. And as always, I try to find the time to take my own approach onto such an ad or setup and see if I can do it and if I can learn something from it, and afterwards I have it in my arsenal if I need it someday. So that's what I did. And I thought this would be a good occasion to show you guys a little bit how to approach such a setup in Vellum. And if you see the ad, I'm not going to even try to link it or post it or show it because probably it's going to be copyright issues. So I'm not even going to do this, but if you see it, the first thing you want to do is maybe see which parts are being simulated and which parts are being procedurally animated. Generally in production or with client work, the less you have to sim, the better. Sounds kind of counter Houdini, but the procedural stuff is actually what's more important or better for any client work, because client changes means you need to be in control of things, and the simulation kind of always takes that away a little bit. So when I saw this ad, I was clearly seeing that the top skin layer is not being simulated, but it's just a plain old sine wave going through some geometry. And the skin cells are being simulated, inflated, and that's how this all comes together. We will see that it's going to take a little bit of tweaking in general with any kind of simulation or setup of this kind to get the timing right. And this is not a thing you can generally say how it's going to work, because each job will be different. Each client will have different expectations on how it should look. So this whole thing is how I thought it looked kind of nice. We are going to see where to tweak the timing, where to get control, and all that stuff. So maybe let's jump in right away how I did the top skin layer, and this is pretty easy actually because it's hand animated and not being simulated. So we're starting off with this grid here, and again this is going to be a walkthrough because everything else would have taken too long, and I think it's more of an intermediate tutorial where I don't have to explain all the basic stuff, but show you guys how to approach such a thing. So this is the main grid I did. I could as well call it grid main because of that. And I'm taking this as pretty much the basis for everything that's following. So this is the main grid, the top skin layer, and I'm taking it, just giving it UVs. You can see here. I don't know why Houdini does that, but if you use the UV texture, you always have to negate this Y scale, so it switches the UVs. Otherwise, they're just switched around. Then I'm doing a poly extrude. Let's get rid of this UV view. And I'm giving it 5 divisions because we want this edge to be round when it's all done and not to be this straight. So I'm giving it 5 divisions right away. Then I'm referencing the grid we did over here, the main grid, by holding down Control, Shift, and Alt and dragging it like this. We're doing this again here, and in some other places. It's good to have this to stay procedural, and whenever I change the main grid, everything else will follow. So we're referencing the grid, giving us pretty much the same grid, but not extruded yet. Then I am applying a sine wave, which is exactly what was happening in the ad. Could do this in many ways in Houdini, whatever way you prefer. I was thinking, why not do one line of code and just throw down a wrangle with a sine operation, which means I'm just applying a sine wave at p.y on the up axis, and this is how it looks. It's not even animated, it's just this sine wave. You can use those controls, you can copy this code if you like. It's just a good thing to know about sine waves and cosine waves in Houdini. If you really want to dive in and control things and make something interesting, I highly suggest or recommend to get used to sine waves in Houdini. This is the frequency, makes it more dense or not, and this is the offset, which you could animate as well if you want to. We're not going to do this. And the amplitude, of course, which is like the strength of the whole thing. So this is what I did. And then I did the same poly extrude we did over here, again referencing the node by holding down Control Shift and Alt and dragging it. As these two are the exact same point numbers and point counts, we can use a blend shapes, and just blend between this wavy thing, skin, of course, and the flat skin. So this skincare setup is classical. You have, if you look at these things, you have all the bad skin. This is such really bad skin cells, and they have to be revitalized by some magic cream stuff. And this is what happens during this process where the cells are being inflated, rejuvenated, and made perfect, so it all looks nice and probably young again. Whatever, so let's continue here. This is still the harsh edge, so we're using a smooth to get it a little bit more smooth. Then I applied a subdivision to get some more geometry and make it a little smoother again. Smooth it again here. So this is kind of what it looked like, and it's kind of nice, or nice enough for what we're doing. And just to give you guys a preview how it's going to look, this is what we're having. And this is by no means a final setup that you will deliver to your client. This is what I call, and always like to do for my projects and client work, a working basic principle. So once you have a working basic principle, which kind of looks like this, it's subdivided, so it's a little bit slow now, sorry. But this is the animation, and if the client is happy with this already, you have almost won. So take a part of what might be the entire setup. Don't take the whole grid and fill it with those bad cells. Take a lot less than you actually need, because this will speed up your simulation process. Everything else will take way too long. And once the client is happy, or you are happy with how the simulation behaves, you can go the Houdini way and just expand it, double the amount of everything, add detail, add noises, make it a little bit more random. That's exactly what Houdini is made for. So you're going to do this, but for the working basic principle, this is fine, and this is exactly what I would do. And this is something you can actually show to your client and say, yeah, look at this. This is how it should look, or how it could look. What do you think of this? And once you have this, you can add detail, throw it into Karma and render it, or Redshift, or whatever. But yes, the working basic principle, this is how I work. And once this is fine, I will add to it. So, where did we leave off? I think here. Just adding normals, and then this is going to be our collider, actually, the animated vellum collider, because this is going to be part of the sim, because you want to have those cells pushing against the skin layer that you have here, and not go through it or anything, but you want basically for the cells to push up this really bad wrinkly skin. So this is what we have as our collider. And then I am getting a reference copy of the main grid into here. Let's deactivate the template flag. Then what I did is I transformed it, made it smaller, and clipped it again to have less cells to work with, to be fast and to be able to iterate faster for the simulation ahead of us. Then I'm using this super cool new, no, it's not new, but it's new that it actually works nice since H21, the quad remesh. You could use an unsubdivide node, but that did some weird stuff on the edges, which is new too. But the quad remesh kind of worked nice for this. It's a little janky, but who cares, right? So I just reduced the point amount on this plane, so I could copy copy the spheres onto it later. I copied it 3 times or 2 times, so I have 3. Then, did I do something here? Does it do anything? Yes, I placed it, probably templated this to see where my bad cells are going to sit roughly. Gave it some normals, so the copy to points knows in which direction to scatter our objects, the bad cells. I'm going to say this a lot in this tutorial. Random orientation for those things that we are going to scatter. There are many ways to do this. Attribute randomize on orient would be the main thing to do, but I found this is even quicker. So it's just at orient equals a random of point number. Done. Okay, let's template this. Yeah. With and without, it's just super random. This is the p-scale. This is kind of a small asset I built myself. You can steal this if you would like to. It's kind of a handy little HDA you can use to set up p-scale. It's made exactly how I work, which is basically configuring a main p-scale first, maybe a seed, having them all uniform scale, and then maybe pulling this. If you look at this, let me show you. If you decrease this multimin, they get smaller. But the overall main p-scale or max p-scale stays the same. That's kind of how I like to work. Yeah, distribution ramp and whatever you want to do with it afterwards, you can do in this little wrangle window. And that's it. Bad cells are scattered now and ready to be simulated. One thing to note, the ad had 3 layers of skin cells, bottom, mid, and top layer of skin cells, and they were or are inflating 1 layer by layer. So bottom first, then mid, then top. And again, the timing has to be tweaked. So I made it pretty fast. I didn't want to really animate the rest length or the inflation. It's just be like this and be all inflated on the next frame thing I did, which we can always retime afterwards, which we are going to do here. Just a little spoiler. Now, we need a fall off on our cells to do it that way. And there's one way I found works pretty well, and it's to actually assemble or pack these objects. And then you are left with points, only 1 point per object. And you can see them if you activate the point view display, and you can, if you press W for the wireframe, you can see those are always at the centroid of those little cells. Now, I want to set up the fall off or the mask attribute only on those points and not on, this geometry, because then the fall off would go through this object as well and not activate it all at once. And so that's why I am assembling. And the bad part about this is you can't see the fall off once you pack this. So what I do all the time is throw down the assemble, click this create packed primitives, And then throw down my usual fall-off wrangle that I use all the time. You can copy this too. This is classic manual fall-off or mask setup. And to see what I'm doing, I'm deactivating this again, just to see how the fall-off is working. And this is what it does. Pretty much going through, as you can see here, the object, which is not what we want, but you can at least see how this fall-off goes through the entire thing, like this, pretty fast. And now if we activate this again, it will only consider this 1 point per object. So you can unpack it and transfer this mask attribute over here that we're setting up. And then you can see that it will activate each object, or in this case even layer, because if you look at this mask wrangle I did, this dist attribute is regarding the bounding box of this whole thing here. And I choose the Y component of the bounding box for the dist attribute, so it goes from 0 to 1, bottom to top. And now you can see if we move through here, 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layers, just like this. Very quickly, again, we're going to retime it, so it has to be kind of quick. That's our fall-off, and we're going to bring this fall-off into the Vellum solver in a second. But this is what it looks like, and this is how you can set up a fall-off like this that activates objects one by one as an entire object and not point by point of the object. If that makes sense. I think you know what I mean. So, going back to here, this is what we have, the scattered bad, ugly skin cells that need to be repaired by some magic stuff. So this is the classic vellum balloon setup. I like to give these output groups really specific names. Many call it C-stretch, or in case of the pressure component, P-stretch. Fine, you know, whatever floats your boat. I like to be a little bit more specific, so I'm old and I like to have a very clear view of what I'm doing. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So this is pretty basic, probably vanilla nodes. This goes into a vellum constraint node, which is the pin to target constraint. We will need this because if we don't have it, I can show you what happens. Vellum will inflate these little bad cells and they are going to fly all over the place. We deactivated gravity on the solver, but yeah, this is what you will get. They will push against the skin layer, the collider, and then float down and be all over the place. Of course, this is not what we want, so we need this vellum constraint called pin to target. And we are setting it to soft, so it has a little bit of wiggle room, but we'll try to keep this shape or all these shapes kind of in place, and that's a very important part of controlling a vellum sim. I set it to 2.5 times 10. This will always need tweaking. You know, this is not values I magically came up with. This is the result of tweaking, going back and forth and seeing this works. I will provide the HIP file for you guys anyway, so you can just experiment a little bit with it. I highly recommend to do that, but you don't have to do the same thing in parallel. Just check the HIP file. All right, this goes into the vellum solver, and what we're having, I can see if it's fast enough for a little preview. Like this, super fast inflation, and then the collider is animated and stops being animated again. This looks pretty quick, and it is, but we will retime it as I said before. The speed of the collider is controlled on this blend shapes node. It will need tuning in and tweaking as well, so it doesn't look weird, like it's already flattening out too early or too late. You know, you have to, it's typical production work as well. You have to tweak the keyframes to make it look right and good. Now, what we need to do, as I said before, is to get this mask that we set up on our little bad cells into the vellum solver, which we are going to do down here. To wrangles, actually geometry wrangles, which I like to use. I think I learned this from Paul Esteves, the goat of Vellum, or Lord Vellum, as I call him. He uses geowrangles as well. I think it's I don't know. I do the same. You need to set them up a little bit. The inputs like this. You can throw down a Vellum constraint properties, and it has pretty much the same setup that you see here on the first two inputs, and the third one is going to be a sub. And this is the output of the mask that we created. If I click this arrow, it will lead you right to this. So this is where it's picking up the mask attribute. Data bindings, you have to say or tell the geometry wrangle to work on the constraint geometry. If you put down a fresh one, geo wrangle, it will be set to geometry. You have to manually type in constraint. Just Houdini things. The rest is actually pretty easy because it's once you get the drift of pulling in an attribute or fall off like this, it's always the same. And you just reference a float, or you just create a new float value, which is referencing the second input. The third input, 0, 1, 2. So it's 2, and it's pulling in the mask attribute we set up. And then all I'm doing is saying if that mask is bigger than 0.2, it's an arbitrary value. You can choose whatever, but it worked pretty nice. You are going to tell that the rest length of the pressure constraint in this case, because we are using pressure stretch as the group. This is very important because it will change on the cloth inflation, which we are going to do next. You are going to tell the wrangle, use these constraints. This is the constraint group that you have to work on, and it's the pressure stretch. So this rest length will be the pressure rest length. Weird words to say in English. And this is how it works. You have a rest length original, which is kind of a rest value on frame 1 or the first sim frame. And you can say this geowrangle to take it and multiply it by some value that you need. It's 10. I made a slider, and it's 10 in this case, but again, this is a result of experimentation. So basically, we're saying once this mask is bigger than 0.2, give this shape or the rest length 10 times its length. So in an ideal setup, this would mean it's 10 times bigger than before. Hopefully. Hopefully I'm saying this right and not something totally weird. Now, why are we doing this second one with the cloth as well? Remember, this is the cloth component of the Vellum balloon, and this is the pressure component. And we need to tackle both, because if we don't, let me just jump somewhere here. You can see this a little bit still, but it's way less than if we wouldn't tackle the cloth as well. You can have some micro jittering. It's very tough to see, if at all, because I took care of it already, but this can happen and doesn't look nice. So you need to at least expand the cloth rest length as well, just a tiny bit. So if you have a look, we have an inflation 10 times on the pressure constraint and 1.75 only on the cloth, but still, trust me, it's needed. Otherwise you get jittering and constraints are not being able to be satisfied by the solver, and that's not what we want. So that's basically it. Inflate pressure, inflate the cloth itself. This is what I always do. It's kind of a go-to in Vellum. I put on a pop wind and don't change anything. No noise amplitude, nothing. Just keep it as is with the air resistance of 1 to give it a little bit more realistic drag. Drag just means it takes energy out of the simulation over time, so it doesn't float around too much. But as we know, it's not floating anyways too much because we're using the pin to target. And this is what this gives us. So pretty fast popping or rejuvenating of the bad cell. And now look at those healthy cells. It's beautiful. This is, of course, not what we want this to look like. So we're using a retime. In this case, I just slowed it down to 1/4 of the speed, the entire thing. I use subdivision, which is, I think, the most expensive mode of interpolation, but I like it best. And of course, this is important if you're rendering this stuff later. You need to scale the velocities as well, because you need it for motion blur. If you forget to activate this, your motion blur will look super weird. Don't forget this. Looking quite nice, because even if we inflated this thing from one frame onto the next one fully, the retime gives us a really nice interpolation between those two states. And I like that. So this again was the result of experimentation, tweaking, seeing how the collider behaves that is here. Template it like this. It will be the wireframe, but if you hold down Control, it will show the whole thing. And just to see if it all goes together. And there you will see, no, it doesn't work anymore because we retimed the cells, but we didn't retime the skin layer yet. So that's why I did a reference copy, again, of the retime, Control-Shift-Alt, drag it over. So it does the exact same stuff you're setting up here. And once this is done, you can see that it actually works right now as well. And there you go. This is pretty much it. Again, this is the working basic principle that you can now take, expand, add detail, add more of everything. I like to use these clean nodes to get rid of the attributes we don't need after a Vellum sim, or even worse, after a pop sim. You have to throw all these away because it's going to be too expensive afterwards. And I set it up this way. I deactivated those two, and I always set it to remove everything, all groups and all attributes, and just choose which ones I would like to keep. In this case, the UVs. If you look at this, everything here has nice UVs, including this one. So it's all set up for you guys to throw into a render engine and just start shading. Velocity, of course, you want to keep as well. And P-scale. P-scale you want to keep because this Vellum post-process is looking for it. And it's a very handy node to just make it a little bit more smooth with this spatial blur and give it some subdivision. And there you go. This is the final result. Should you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I will try to check in regularly. I hope I manage that. But yeah, this is how I at least would approach a setup like this. And again, this was not about presenting you guys a finished production setup, but how to get a working basic principle. Because that's what I like to do. And this is what you will build all the rest on. I hope this was useful. Please let me know in the comments if it was useful, or if I should do another tutorial next, which is not this kind of walkthrough, or again, if I should stop doing this entirely because it's bullshit. Thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.